So we've heard about your first project that you can remember, and I've got to say, organising events has always looked like project management to me. I've got a friend of mine who does running events and organising local running events, and you look at what they've got to do to put on a local running event with closing roads, coordinate. You just look at that and it's just a project. And people, weddings, a huge project.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's weird that project management isn't taught as a skill in schools, but then kids have to do projects. So you get about, we've got a project to do. Oh, well, you haven't taught them how to do projects yet.
There are some schools embracing that, and the PMI Educational Foundation has resources for people who want to teach it in schools. But you're right, I think it should be a curriculum subject, because we had Kanban boards up. In fact, the boys made one at the weekend during lockdown for homeschool. We created a Kanban board of what we were going to study and what we were going to do each day and when we'd done it. And I'm hoping that I can pass on some project management skills to them, because it's a life skill. Being able to organize yourself is a real benefit to people. So I know some people, people think in a variety of different ways, and different techniques work better for different people. But if the basics and the principles and the theory is there, then they can hopefully find ways of working that work best for them. So I wish it was a bit more embedded in the curriculum.
I do as well. I was delighted the other day. My daughter, who is writing a book, my eldest daughter, she does creative writing and things, and she'll get an idea for part of her story and stuff, and she's scribbled it on her arm in class. and I was sat with her, and she said, "Oh yeah," she's putting it up, and she's got her phone. "What are you doing?" "I'm just putting it on my Trello board," because I'd introduced her to Trello. And
brilliant.
And I was like, my work is done here.
You are bringing up humans that will enter the workplace fully employable.
Yeah, with tools that you can do. Whereas a few years ago, when the whole family kind of looked a bit silly, we were doing something in the garden. We have 3 windows in our kitchen, and I had Post-its on the windows of that's all the stuff we're doing as we do this this garden project. And it's like, when you've got one, stick it in the middle. When we've done it, stick it over there. And they can't. I was the only one who did it, to be honest. That we had the list, but I was the only one who moved the tickets. I was essentially Scrum Master for it.
That's okay, because they see you modeling it, and they'll probably go, "Oh my God, Dad's doing that embarrassing sticky note thing again." And then they'll get older and they'll have a project to do at university, or they'll get a job, and then they'll go, "Oh, that sticky note thing," and they go, "Oh my goodness, it really works." So that's what I'm hoping, is that I will just be a role model for lists.
Sow the seeds.
Sow the seeds. I know project management's more than lists, but if they can see me doing some of the things and using some of the tools, actually, I'm hoping when they're older, I can get them to do some of my blog and be useful, and then they can learn the business side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, as you say, it's not just about lists, but it isn't. The outcome isn't what it's about, is it? It's the exercise of going, right, I've got this thing to complete. What have I got to know to complete it? Let's break down the component parts, whether it is a Kanban board, whether it is a list, or whatever it is, whether it's a detailed Gantt chart, and depending on how well they know what it is, and how they understand all the dependencies, and how detailed they know each task, will decide whether they go, right, okay, I can write a sequential plan here, or I've got a bunch of tickets that I'm going to have to iterate and break down and do it in an agile fashion. And it's those mindsets, doesn't matter which of the way they use it, but it's that breaking it down and eating the elephant piece by piece, rather than trying to eat the whole thing. That is the bit that they learn. Because I have it. We have things that we want to do in it, and I sometimes sit there looking at what we need to do and things in this house. There's always something. There's always some in the garden, and I sit there going, "Oh, my brains are hurting," because there's so many things to hold in your head. And that's what happens if you try holding it all in your brain or on one sheet of paper. You can't do it. But if you learn how to break it down, that's where you can go forward, can't you?
Exactly. Yeah. I agree.
So we talked about your first project. What about the biggest project that you've had? And when I say biggest, I don't mean necessarily pounds, shillings and pence. I don't necessarily mean number of people. It might mean impact that you had, or it might be any, whatever is that context for you. It's not just a monetary value or a people days value.
Well, the biggest was putting SAP in across our 38, 40 different locations. That was very much a team effort. We had a very hands-on project sponsor, loads of commitment from the senior team. It was very much a burning platform situation. So the change, while it was difficult, was actually easy because there was no organizational choice. It was, we move our software onto this new software tool, or we do not have a business. We cannot operate in a couple of years' time. So the vision was very clear. The project was very structured, and coordinating all of those different work streams. We ended up training about 6,000 staff. So, you know, that was, and it was millions, but that was big for me and big for the organization. It was probably the biggest change project that they'd led for, or they'd had to implement for many years. But if you compare that to something like, you know, oil and gas or building an Olympic stadium, I mean, it's not big, but that was probably my biggest. I think another one that was quite, towards the end of my time at Spire, I ended up doing quite a few things that were sort of more business change rather than IT. And so being involved in the work to get us ready for GDPR. And that was, again, that was, you know, transformational in many respects, and a lot of communication. It touched a lot of different areas of the organization. But then so did some of the other healthcare regulations that came into force, and having to implement some of those, which radically changed the way that we captured data, radically changed the way that we interacted with doctors, and how we reported on progress and how we were judged by the industry. So those were big in a different way. Big, but not that you'd know. If you were outside of healthcare, you wouldn't think necessarily anything of it, but in terms of what it meant to me and what it meant to us, I think some of those were
and it is, and that's why I said, I always don't think of it as being umpty million, because there's that complexity. There's so many factors that can define something as big, is my view of it. And I think that's why I try to, before I ask that question, was always say, don't just pin it down to pounds, shillings and pence, because pounds, shillings and pence can be, it's very easy to install something of umpty million pounds if you just place an order with a PO and stick it in a room. That's an easy project, isn't it?
Exactly. Some kind of commercial off the shelf software installation for an international company is very big. But when putting in place a new software tool that changes the way that hospitals were run was a change management piece, which took a lot, because, you know, we were putting in technology that would replace green screen technology. So one of the strands that we had was digital literacy and technical literacies. How capable are you of being able to drive this new tool? Because we've never asked you to do this before, and our old tools were not like this. So there was a little piece around, you know, how ready are people, and also changing people's jobs. I mean, you know, a lot of technology in healthcare changes what people do, and you don't become a nurse necessarily because you want to spend all day on a computer typing stuff in, scanning electronic records or whatever. You work in the profession because you have other skills that you can bring, other uses, and the easier the tech is, the less time you have to spend behind a computer doing admin stuff, the more time you can be out there supporting patients and making the right clinical choices, and you know, helping people in the way that you probably wanted to when you joined the job. So some of that change management of trying to make sure people had the tools and the skills and the knowledge, but were not hampered from doing what was actually why they were employed, was quite a challenge. But it's a challenge in a good way, I think. But
it's a wry smile there. You sound unsure.
I know you need to ask perhaps some of the people I was doing the change to.
Well, I think
I might be looking back 10 years with rose tinted glasses.
I think the thing is it's difficult, isn't it? Because and I've been on the receiving end of projects that have been done to us and tools that are rolled out without necessarily focusing on the users and more focusing on the people who are getting the data that's coming out of it. And it's kind of like there's more people putting data in this than people consuming it. Think about who's putting in this data to save you time. And then basically you've got lots of data saying why the people who aren't delivering what they need to do because they haven't got time because they're telling you what there's a balance obviously on those things. And there's always,
yes.
And I've been on the other side where things have been implemented and it's like, yes, finally someone's done this. And I've been asking for this for ages and it's made my life easier and I can get on with doing other things. And obviously mine's dealing with people and dealing with projects. It's nothing that is as important as a nurse or a doctor giving high quality care to an individual and having the time to assess someone. And so as you say, it's that being able to spend another hour dealing with people rather than dealing with data and paperwork.
Yes,
is such massive difference that can make. It's just huge. So what did you learn from those projects, from those large projects? Because typically they can be quite educational.
Yes, I learned that what you start out to do isn't necessarily where it ends up, even if you're waterfall.
Yeah.
So we were definitely not agile for any of those projects, but often working to a fixed date as well. I think all three of those projects that I mentioned had a fixed date. So we had to iterate, but I suppose rolling wave planning would be probably the closest thing to it. And then when we were developing SAP, the development team would sit quite closely with the end users and make sure it was configured, very much kind of like peer programming, I suppose, but not with two technical people, because that was the most sensible way to do it. I mean, we did get requirements documents created, and then people would sit and program to them, but actually showing people what you're actually doing, showing the end users as you go, is a much more effective way and be a faster way of getting things done. So I suppose I learned from that there is no perfect methodology. You have to tailor what you do to every situation, and it's fine to just make a start and see where you end up. As long as you've got a goal in mind, that can really focus the mind. I suppose the key thing, and the radiology project that I haven't talked about, was having a really clear vision. Is what is it that we want to do? What is our driving goal? And maybe it's GDPR compliance, maybe it's compliance with regulation, maybe it's getting rid of this ancient software so that we can stay compliant and be able to operate in the industry. All of those are very clear. And if you're working on something that's some kind of digital transformation or some culture improvement project or process re-engineering where you're not really clear what your goal is, I think it's a lot harder to deliver that change. So the story, trying to work out what is the story. So if we were piloting something, we would catch the stories of why it was better the way that we wanted to do it. And we would put a photo and a quote from the person who told us it was better on the slides for the next project kickoff meeting for the next group of people who are being affected. So we're trying to spread the word, really. So I suppose it comes back to stakeholders and people and engagement and communication. But one of the things I think I learned when I was trying to work out what the impact was and how many people we'd trained, because we had to do a presentation at the end to another company to say, what it was like working with a third party and could we share some learnings. And so I thought, well, I'll include a nice infographic at the end with some stats, and I didn't have very much. So from that experience, trying to work out how many people did we actually train, how many hours of coding did we actually do, how many people are even on our project team, because if you're managing, I had 3 or 4 core work streams, 20 core project people, but beyond that, I mean, there was hundreds and hundreds of people that I didn't know. And so someone says, how many people are on your project? You're like, well, sure, kind of like everybody, but probably, I couldn't give you a list. So I learned to keep better records, to tell the story and share the benefits at the end and to show the impact. And that sounds quite selfish, really. It's like, so I want to show off how many people I trained, or not me personally, but to talk about the size and scale of the project. But if you don't capture this stuff, that's the kind of data that can be really interesting for lessons learned. It can be useful for stakeholders. And when people go, what have you spent the last year doing? And you can say, well, we've written this many lines of code, or we've built this many buildings, or we've done this much with a team of this many people, and we've sent this many thank you notes. It's just putting some kind of human angle and story behind the work.
Yeah, I think it is story. There's it's so important telling the story, whether you've got the vision. I found that kind of to bring people forward with things is actually talking in the context of a story. And I can't remember where I was reading it, is the fact that we're storytelling creatures. In that, from way back when, before we had pieces of blooming paper and computers, the way you would communicate is through a story. And even if we're sat at a coffee telling someone about something that's going on, we're telling a story. And sometimes you need that information to tell that story. And you can tell someone, yes, this is really, really important because we've done this, that we've got X, Y, and Z as numerics. But the person whose photo you said there, and they said, this is great. I remember I was working on one project where someone they were moving to a digital device rather than to a desktop. And they said, I'm not carrying a wad of papers anymore. I'm just carrying this new device. It's great. And that for us was when we were doing our lessons learned and success criteria. That was one of our top stories to talk about, was the fact that this person's going, it's great, I'm not carrying stacks of paper with me anymore. And that was one of the reasons for doing it.
Yes, and that's the
story.
That's the story. That's the evidence. But it's human evidence. It's not just, we implemented a tool to reduce the amount of paper by 25%. Well done, ticking the box. But it's that photo. We took photos of people in meetings. We took photos of people doing, or just sitting at computers typing stuff, because it just shows that there's work going on behind the scenes. We made a video of, this is our server room, because we had the infrastructure piece of putting in place a new tool was humongous. And we took people to visit the new data center. And it was really exciting because they weigh you when you go in, and then they weigh you when you come out, so you haven't stolen anything. Just little things like that make me think, and we spent £1 million on computers and racking and cables, and I don't know, we spent a lot of money and a lot of time. And what do we have to show for it at the end? Literally nothing. I mean, for the person on the street sees nothing of that. So we did videos, and we had our experts, our people, the techie people, saying, well, this is what we've installed, look at the flashing lights. And you think, okay, well, now I can see it, now I can visualize there is somewhere that is not in my office where this money has gone, where this time has gone, and we can see the progress. And so little things like that. I know it sounds really cheesy. It probably was really cheesy, but it helps people visualize what's happening when the story is, we bought some computers and we put servers in, which is because it's not sexy, it's not interesting. Who cares?
Boring, isn't it? Boring. And it's got even more boring now, because where are all your computers? Amazon's got them somewhere. Somewhere on the Arctic Circle. Let's
have a visit to that data center.
I don't know how many they've got in Iceland, but then again, with the volcanic there, I doubt there'd be much there. But Iceland would be a good one if we could find a way there. But yeah, I get what you're saying on that. Those little stories you can do, those little it's kind of justifications in some ways, but that's probably too strong a word. But it does help people realize what you've actually done.
Even now, I'm involved with writing some business cases for some particular bits of medical technology, and I'm reading it thinking, what this would really be good at, given that it's going to be reviewed by finance people who might not have seen this particular scope or pump before. Let's whack a photo of it in. Let's whack a photo in of the old rubbish ones that are being replaced, and the new shiny ones, or not so much with medical equipment, but with things like what are we going to do? We want to invest money in, for example, putting new sheds in. A made up example, but let's take a picture of these old falling down sheds and justify why, because I think people sometimes pictures help. They can really help make you literally see why real, we need to take a particular course of action.
Makes things real.
Yes.
And even if I did a presentation on net zero stuff the other week, and part of it was about washing machines and how you can thinking about how you different things. But I had a picture of a really old washing machine in there. One of those, the old mangle my nan used to have. Yeah, one of those. And I had one of those in there. And it's kind of like, yeah, we want to get eco-friendly ones, because that was probably really eco-friendly. And another one where we had a concept of we were delivering some stuff to Microsoft Windows updates. And so you had this one service that you put in that was like a communication line. Then you had another service which was to deliver the stuff. And we basically come up with a concept of a railway. And so the first thing you did, you put the telegraph lines in. Then that helped you communicate and check what's going on. Then you put the rail in. And then through that rail, we put several different things down that railway to deliver several different. And we use that as a concept to get everyone together. And it really worked really well for me anyway. And you pick a few silly photos and things like that, but it helps people realize, and people talked about it afterwards. Yeah, well, this is a train track, remember? This isn't the end solution. That's coming down. The train's coming tomorrow. Thomas the Tank will be down there tomorrow. And it helps you talk in those sort of things, get those visualizations. And as you say, if you've got those, the finance people, and you can talk about them and bring them back to that concept and take away from just the raw data, can't you? So let's thinking about your projects. What would you say over your career is your biggest screw up?
No, I was hoping you weren't going to ask me this.
Because this is my favorite question. One of my favorite questions. And what did you learn? Most important part of it.
Well, early on in my career, and this is a story I tell quite often, I forgot a key stakeholder, and that didn't turn out too well for me. I filled in an Excel spreadsheet to track a budget and got the formulas wrong and lost loads of money. I said we had more money than we actually did. I pulled rank on another project manager, and I never felt so embarrassed in my life. That was not a good moment. And after, as it came out of my mouth, I was like, why am I speaking to you like this? Yeah, so I think she forgave me, but
I've heard all of those myself. I've done all. I think I've heard, all three of those I've got on my list, I think.
I think what I learned from each experience of not doing a good job. Oh, also, I sent out something that I felt was in my power to send out. You send out reports, or someone says, do an update, and I sent out something, and I got into a lot of trouble for sending that out with the particular numbers that I had included. And I suppose that I learned from that to just check that project sponsors are happy before you send anything, even if what you're sending is true. Maybe the project sponsor would like to have it framed in a certain way, or perhaps that's not right.
Yeah, they may want to tell the story
exactly
around the outside of it to soften the blow with some people.
So that was not a good day. I've learned about my boundaries, because I've learned different things around making sure I don't work weekends, and falling into bed at midnight after spending hours doing emails in a hotel because I've worked all day off-site, and then it got exhausted, but then you go back to your computer and you turn it on, you've still got a whole day's worth of work to do because you've been in meetings all day. So I don't know, I feel like project management is totally a learning experience all the time. There's always lessons to learn about how you are and how you behave with other people and how you come across as an individual, and how that shapes the conversation. And there's also the core skills, the project management practice, that you think, well, now I've made that mistake, I double check all my Excel formulas properly, and I rely on the finance analysts. I don't try and do too much maths myself. But there's the technical things that you're learning all the time as you test out new things and new tools, and then there's the people side of it, the people skills.
Excellent. So should we flip it back on its head and be a bit more positive now? What would you say is your proudest project delivery? Which of those that you look back of, and I'm sure the first one that's come into your head is probably what it is, that just gives you a warm glow, and you can sit there and go, I did that. That was me. And your team, obviously, but it'll be, you made you feel good.
I think coming into healthcare, the first project I was given was to put new computer systems and new machines into X-ray departments. And we had a team, there were 4 or 5 of us. We did the same thing in lots of different hospitals over about 2 years, and we got really good at it. And they were lovely. And I think I'd say from an achievement perspective, I loved how that team came together. I loved how I worked with experts every day who knew their stuff, and working with a team of people who were really brilliant and who were respected rubbed off on me. And the fact that, you know, I was the person behind the scenes, I wasn't out connecting up computers, I wasn't out talking to doctors and radiologists and hospitals, but I was the behind the scenes person holding it all together. And knowing that we all had a role to play, and we all each knew what our roles were, and we worked so complementarily, that's not a word, is it?
Near enough.
Together. You know what I mean?
Complementary.
Yes, that one.
Complementarily. That was probably
yes,
it.
Yes. Yeah. that was good. And it meant that we had, you know, inbuilt escalation paths. So if it didn't go well for somebody, then I could step in. And if I didn't have the answers, then I could draw on the technical team. And we just knew. And if they said they were going to do something, they did. And I did as well. You know, if I said I was going to do something, we had that trusted working relationship. And we did things like, so one of the things I did on that project was we were planning a rolling schedule of making sure we could get through as many hospitals as we could in a year. And I made the team put breaks into the schedule because we need them, because it's silly. And we built that lessons learned in, so that one team could feed back to the others about what they'd learned on one site, so that when we went in to do another site, we were continually getting better, instead of having sort of 3 parallel tracks happening and the 3 teams didn't speak to each other. So I think, well, the delivery was, you know, it wasn't, there was nothing groundbreaking about it. I can't say that the outcome was anything amazing, but the process of being involved with that and knowing that we could do a project, repeat it, get better, especially because the first 2 pilots were a bit of a pants experience, and we paused the project till we could sort it all out. And it was the first project that I worked with professional testers. Yeah, exactly. So I suppose I learned from that the value of actually having a real pilot, because later on in my career, people were saying, well, we'll pilot it, and then once that's launched, we'll go live with the next one the week after. Like, that's not a pilot. No. But we worked with professional testers. We had a proper test environment. It just felt like it was being done properly, and we were being given the tools, the autonomy, the budget, and we had just a big pot of money, and I could spend it how I wanted, as long as everybody got what they needed. And if it meant that we moved a little bit from one site to another site because it better suited the needs overall, as long as the book's balanced at the end of the day, I had a lot of autonomy to be able to make those decisions, and I enjoyed that, and the team enjoyed knowing that they could influence that.
It's good when you get that, isn't it? Because so difficult when you're going kind of cap in hand for fairly straightforward, obvious decisions for efficiency and for the long goal of the project. You've got to go around and go, oh yeah, but we've got to make sure we've done this, and 15 people have got to triplicate sign it, and by the time they've done that, it's too late to have even implemented what you were going to try to do anyway.
All we want is another headset for the machine, and it's like 150 quid. Think, why?
Yeah, it just drives you crazy, doesn't it? And you do. I know as a project manager that I think there's an entrepreneurial spirit about us. But that also translates into a bit of control freakery, and kind of work like, just give me the direction, give me the thing, I'll do it, go away. I'll let you know when I need you, and I'll keep you informed, but just let me run the team. Let me run the existence.
The team reported to me, so it wasn't like that at the beginning, but then as a part of a restructure, they actually became my staff. And that also helped us, because it meant we were pretty much ring-fenced from all the politics of everybody else. And it was great because we could control our own time. So, I mean, that was only temporary during the life of the project, but while that existed, it was great, and a good learning experience for me as well. What does it mean to be a line manager? And I realized I didn't like it, but good to try it out. And so I think that was probably one of the best projects I've been on, because of what we were able to do and how we were able to help with new technology, and people were grateful, and also because of how the team was and how we were as a team. And you get to know people when you're on the road with them, and you get to count them as your friends. And we had social events, and we tried to factor in Christmas going out places, and it was, I'm not in touch with any of them anymore, so they're not, but in terms of work friends, they were, it was a nice working environment, and we had a lot of autonomy, and I think that made a big difference. And it taught me that that's how projects could and should be, because I think the bigger the project, the more oversight and governance there needs to be on it, and that means the more executives want to meddle in it. Rightly so, but I found that the bigger, the more transformative projects have a much more political side to them. So there's a lot more of that, where the project management role turns less into doing the job of a project manager and much more into relationship management, negotiating. And I suppose that's what happens as you get more experienced and you get given bigger things, the role changes, and it's not really what we would notice as what we would know as pure project management anymore. It's much more, I don't know, it's not even really proper program management. It's more a blend of all of those things, and change management, and just get it done, Elizabeth. But don't forget to tell everybody what you're doing all the time, and change. And when we change our mind every 5 minutes, we'll expect new plans.
I know where you're coming from. I know exactly where you're coming from. So with all this going on, you're obviously been busy, doing all these projects, delivering all this work, family as well. You decided to start blogging and writing. What made you do that? And let's talk about Rebel's Guide to PM.
Well, I've always written, like your daughters. I wrote creatively when I was younger. I wrote stories and poems and all that jazz that you do, the teenage outpouring of angst that comes out as poor poetry. But I always said I'd write a book, and I said I wanted to write a book before I was 30, and that time started to come around quite quickly, and I needed to get on with it. And so I thought, well, what do I know? Hang on, it can't have been write a book before I was 30. I'm just trying to think back. Maybe it was. Maybe I don't know. It must have been that a milestone birthday. Write a book before a certain point. Anyway, and I thought, well, I don't know anything. My mum's saying, write a bestseller, write something like Jilly Cooper, then we can all be millionaires. And I'm like, yes, mum, of course, it's exactly up my wheelhouse. Of course I can do that. So the only thing I know, the only thing I've been doing is project management. So surely I can just write about that. But being a bit of an imposter and being quite young still at the time, I was thinking, well, I don't really have that much experience myself to talk about. So can I collect some case studies from other people, collate them, put some commentary, and use that as the frame for the book. So it's not just me, Elizabeth tells you what to do, but it's actually a collation of stories. And that became my first book. And when I was looking at how do you publicize books, people said, well, you should be blogging. So back in 2006, when blogging was very different to how it is now, I thought, well, all right, then I'll have a blog. So I learned HTML and I learned WordPress, and I've learned some CSS so that I could code my theme myself, and started to do that. So I started writing from that perspective, thinking, well, what could I write about? I mean, there were, at that point I had started to speak at conferences and talk about projects and what we were doing, and I was reading the project management press, and I had written some articles for project management magazines and things, but often what I saw on conference programs, what I saw, the little photos next to the mastheads of all the articles, were pictures of men. And I thought, well, maybe there's space for a little bit more of a feminine take on what it means to be a project manager, because my lived experience is most project managers are women. In the organization I was in at the time, and subsequent to that, most of the project managers I have had direct work alongside have been women, and yet there weren't that many back in the day with their pictures in magazines, because we just the representation wasn't as good as it is now.
Yeah, middle-aged white man.
Yep. And to a certain extent, that is still true.
It is, yeah, it is. It is way too true. It is still too many of those.
So that's the angle I took. And so Girls Guide to Project Management was born, and I was the girl, and it was my guide to project management. And then I started blogging and just never stopped.
Yeah. And that's and so now let's talk about the change of title. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's worth talking about, and I'm quite happy to have any kind of topics on this, really. And I think this is an important, I'm guessing this is an important topic. I might be wrong, but let's talk about it.
It's Girls Guide to Project Management has always been slightly controversial in its title, because I think people would email me and say, well, I'm a man, but I still read your blog. Is that allowed? Oh, I shared it with my colleague and he wouldn't read it because he said it was for girls, stuff like that. But people would come up to me at conferences and go, oh, you're Girls Guide to PM. And I'd go, yeah, that's me. So I got known as it. It became a moniker of me. And I got very tied up and emotionally attached to it as a name. And I kept having to justify, no, it's for everyone, but I'm the girl and it's my guide. And don't you understand apostrophes, you imbeciles? But you don't have an apostrophe in a URL, do you? So no. I can understand. And it got abbreviated without the apostrophe when you write the URL. Anyway, for lots of different reasons, I felt very attached to it. But then I was also, I turned 45 last year, and suddenly, can I talk about myself as a girl anymore? I didn't think I could, and I haven't been able to do that for quite some years because I am now older. And also, people would email me and say, you shouldn't talk about women as girls. You are infantilizing a generation of women in the workplace, and we do not talk about ourselves as girls. It's not professional and it's not right. And someone even emailed me to say that my logo, which was a picture that an artist, I'd paid a lot of money for an illustrator to design a logo, which was lovely, and it's still my screensaver today, actually, because I'm really, again, emotionally attached to this picture of a woman at a computer. And she'd written to me to say, why are you using a cartoon picture of a woman? It's not right. It's not professional, and it's not right. So there was this tension between people who thought it's great to hear about female voices and it's very noticeable and memorable, and then there's tension between people who thought I wasn't doing womankind any services.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because on picking out all of those points, and I can see some of the points there, and I kind of said that I go to that last one, the cartoon one. It's not professional. So
yeah,
well, there are people I know. There's we use them in our place where people do illustrations alongside when we have conferences.
Oh yes, graphic recorders.
Graphic recorders, yeah. Which they're drawing cartoons, aren't they? And they're drawing amazing stuff, and it's professional, and they are professionals. And therefore, anyone saying that a cartoon is unprofessional, I would heartily disagree with and say they're being a little bit unprofessional. But unprofessional and professional is a terrible phrase, because one person's and you can get down to the point of someone who's no, I'm not going to say what I'm going to say, but there's you could there could be certain things that is a profession. It's a perfectly valid profession, but I've seen people on LinkedIn will be saying, well, that's not professional. But that's their profession. Yeah, because that's what they do.
It's not appropriate in workplaces. It's the same thing as, do you use emojis in your emails or not? And it's very culturally specific to your organization. And so I totally understand the principles of let's speak about women in a professional way. Yeah. It just took me a very long time to feel that I could give up the character, the creation that I had made, and the name that I was very attached to. But like I say, it became to the point where it didn't feel like it was me anymore. Yeah. And also, if we're totally honest about it, if being 45, thinking about retirement and pensions and all the rest of it, I might sell that website at some point. And if I do, it's not going to be me, the girl. It needs to be a different brand. So if we are going to rebrand, it was always going to be a pain in the bum.
Yeah.
But trying to find a new name was really hard.
Well, it's like naming a band. It's always hard to name a band. It's like choosing your website to name. Like if you're using your own name, that's quite easy, isn't it? As long as it's available. And
Yes.
an unusual name is easier to capture than a common name. But it's all bands. Choosing the band name is always hard. Or name or title for your book is also hard as well, isn't it?
Yes, but in the end, I mean, I run a membership community called Project Management Rebels, which is a group of people who we meet twice a month. We do Zoom calls. We just do office hours mentoring. We do a bit of training, that kind of stuff. So that's a community group for project managers. And I do not know why I didn't think about Rebels as part of the name a long time ago, really. And it was only when I was talking to my husband about what we're going to call it. This name is really rubbish. This name I can't have because I can't get the Pinterest, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you've already got Rebels. How about doing something that links to that? And I'm like, Dole, how did I not think of that before? So, you know, Project Management Rebels is our inner circle community where people can become a member and learn stuff. And just the Rebels Guide is our new name for the blog. So now actually it fits together much more as a better ecosystem than it ever did in the past. And it took a few months to work all of that through and then work. But now we're there. I'm really happy. I'm really happy that we changed. I don't know why I didn't do it sooner. I emailed out to my mailing list and told them about it. And the only comments I had back were nice and been very, very nice, and a lot of them. And I was thinking, why was I so scared to make this move? I should have done it a long time ago.
Well, change is always hard, isn't it? That's why the world needs project managers, and sometimes we need project managers to manage us, don't we? Or someone not involved to look at what we're doing and say this is what needs to happen. So, well, that's brilliant. I've got a few of my sort of wrap up questions that I normally have, and I was on interviewing someone the other day, and they'd given me another one, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh well, that's it. I've not added it to my list of questions that I'm asking you that I've got guiding down here that I haven't had before. So with all of those things there. So what's the last project management podcast that you've listened to?
Yours with Eleanor.
Good. Right answer.
But before that, because I thought you might not let me get away with saying that, the Project Chatter podcast from the EVA 26 conference.
Yeah, I've got that on my download. That I haven't managed to listen to any podcasts at the moment for the last few weeks. I don't do my normal run, so I've crooked my knee, so I haven't had a listen to them. So that one's on my list. It's I'm desperately want to have a listen to that. And I had those guys on the podcast, and I've been on their podcast recently, and they were. I'm sure it's going to be really interesting to have a listen. What was the last project blog that you read? And you can't have your blog for editing purposes.
That's fine. Antonio Nieto Rodriguez. I get his emails. He has a blog on LinkedIn about project management, and an email from him came today, and to follow him because he wrote the foreword for my new book. Excellent. And he's always got very good insights into the world. It makes project management feel bigger than often sometimes it can feel.
Yeah, because he just had a book, one Harvard Business Review book. Is that the one?
Right. Yeah, the Harvard Business Review Handbook of Project Management.
That's it. Yeah, I haven't seen that around. I haven't got a copy of that yet. What would you say would be your top tip for a seasoned project manager? So someone been project managing 10 years, 15 years, they've been there, they've done a lot, they've had some significant work, significant success, a few failures. What would your top tip would be to say to them?
I would say probably something around nobody will manage your career for you. If you've had that level of success and you are a seasoned PM and you want something else, you have to go out and make those opportunities because nobody hands them to you on a plate. The challenge is the better you are, the more you do, the more invaluable you become to your organization, the fewer opportunities to do different things there are because you are valuable to them in a particular role. So if you want to grow, to get a bigger pay rise, to do something else, that might mean a different kind of move. So I think it's always a good reminder to remember that we are the only people responsible for our career choices. And if you want to be chief project officer by the time you're 50, 45, 35, whatever, then you have to make that happen.
Great advice. Really good. As I've currently, my latest book's about productivity hacks. Someone said to me, why don't you ask people about their productivity hacks that they might have? So that's my new question. So what one single tip about improving a person's individual productivity, and project managers specifically, would you give to someone?
One single tip?
Yeah.
There's the Managing Multiple Projects book, there's a whole chapter of this.
I know there will be.
My one single tip is probably the good old sticky note, and 3 things that you want to get done for tomorrow. You write them on your sticky note, you stick it on your laptop, and then you come in the next morning and you go, oh yeah, those are my goals for the day. Because too many mornings for me have been wasted going, oh God, I've slept, I don't know, or it's Monday, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or some stuff's coming overnight, or there's emails I need to deal with, but they are not your most strategic important goals. Your most strategic important goals are the things you thought about last night that were how you wanted to spend the day the next day. Do those.
Yeah. Brilliant advice. And this is my final question. That first day on that project, maybe it's the one we talked about where you were sat there, excuse me, wondering whether to shake hands with people or not. If it was you now who'd walk through that door and you were just shaking the hand of your younger self, what's the one bit of advice would you give yourself about project management on that first day?
I would say it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. And one of my very wise managers told me that, and I thought, yeah, that is right, because often, you know, if you're doing things and you've got the project's interests at heart and you're doing what is right and ethical and sensible, you're not really going to get into any trouble for making smart choices. You've probably helped someone by taking the decision off them. And you know, if you have done it wrong, you ask for forgiveness, you say sorry, you move on.
Yeah, and you learn.
And you learn from it.
You learn,
and if you're in a good supportive organization, then that will not be a problem. So just do it. I think I've written on my board, it says think brave. Just have the courage to just do it.
That's brilliant. I think that's a fantastic piece of advice for everyone there. It's kind of something I've found is if you're asking permission, it takes that long to get permission that the opportunity's gone. So yeah, or I can't remember what it was now. It was a blog on something or something on LinkedIn where someone had written about oh, my brain's going silly. About the indecision gap when you're presenting opportunities to people. And that's the same sort of thing, because it's more likely when you're asking permission, people go, oh, I don't know whether you're allowed, let me go and check. And it's that cost of indecision, it's that delay of there that just rips it up. Now, thank you. I know we've gone on longer than you probably planned. And it's
that's fine.
A couple of technicals at the beginning. Really appreciate the amount of time you've given me. It's fantastic.
No problem. Thank you for having me on the show. It's
great to have you on. If people want to get hold of you, want to chat to you, have you got anything, speaking engagement, books coming out, whatever is going on that you would like to promote to the listeners, let me know.
Buy my things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or just how people can find out about those things.
Sure. My next book is called Managing Multiple Projects, and that's out in May 2022. So you can have a look for that if you're one of these people like me who has to juggle several projects on the go at any one time.
Yeah.
And then, as we talked about, if you go to Rebel's Guide to PM, there's that's my blog. And I'm on all the social media places. You can find me on Instagram. We have a Facebook group called Project Management Cafe. And then our membership community is projectmanagementrebels.com. You can find me there too. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm in all the places. You can come and hang out with me wherever you want.
I'll stick all the links in the show, but yeah, guys, you'll be able to find them there. So Elizabeth, all I can say is thank you very much for coming on the show, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.